as the commentator mentioned, I've been doing accounting research as a social science, trying to make an impact on knowledge and practice. So I'm going to brief in this speech as to how you could actually think about doing social science research impactfully. In order to do so, I will talk about the nature of research in the social sciences and also meaning of impact and its standing in the UK and ways of doing it as a social scientist. Firstly, nature of research in the social sciences, management, accounting, economics, all these are social sciences, of course, including sociology, political science, anthropology, history. They are all social sciences sharing a particular understanding of issues in society. Hence, social scientists looked at an ideology or use an ideology in order to frame the issues, in order to frame research questions, for them to see why and how things are happening around us. Things in society, things in organizations, things in policy, things in global landscape, why and how things happen. So in order to see that, in order to understand that, social scientists see social science as an ideology. Ideology for framing issues and for seeing the things. These issues could be policy issues, and they can be related to practices. And also they may be about reform programs in countries or in organizations. There are issues around these things. Issues around policies, practices, reforms, etc. Social science researchers look for these issues. But also social scientists use a theory as a way of seeing. For example, I've been using a particular theory called Critiques and Justifications by two French philosophers, Boltanski and Thevenot. I'll come back to that shortly. So by using a theory, we frame issues in policies, practices, and reforms. Why? In order to extend our current understanding. Hence, we can make an impact on society, on practice. That is the question we need to think of now. How can we do an academic research while making an impact? This impact can often be indirect. But nowadays, universities are tending to ask the researchers to make impact direct. That is the thing I want to discuss today. Look at this. Give me a moment. Look at this abstract. This is an abstract of a paper I published. So as you see here, the paper's aim is to explore the societal relevance of management accounting. For that, I studied a case study in Sri Lanka. I conducted a case study in Sri Lanka. Having done that case study, in this paper, I examine how management accounting is implicated in societal relevance. That is the purpose. For that, this paper reports on a post-colonial neoliberal states' use of cost savings experiments and the resultant emancipation of the individuals involved. For that, I conducted a bottom-up analysis from micro events in the hospital to policymaking at the level of provincial council in the country. Finally, this analysis suggests that cost accounting acts as a mediating instrument. It begins to loosen the old Keynesian post-colonial bureaucratic budget confinements. It creates a social space for individuals to consider cost-saving experiments within that space. Therefore, it addresses wider policy concerns about hospital resource management through cost savings experiments. So when you conduct such a case study, when you have such a story from a case study, we need to illuminate that story by using a social theory. That is what we normally do here in Glasgow as accounting researchers. All my PhD students here in Glasgow do the same. In this paper, the story is illuminated by Gilles Deleuze and Sigmund Baumer's ideas, two social scientists, two philosophers, on post-panoptic societies. The theory there is that all confinements are being problematized and new flexible liquid spaces are created. Within that space, individuals are emancipated. They are liberated in terms of their ability to influence resource management within and beyond that hospital constituency. So what you see here is an academic contribution. The purpose of this research is to enhance our understanding about how management accounting can be societally relevant. There is a similar case study we conducted. This is a Malaysian case study conducted by one of my ex-PhD students, Soon Young. He is from Malaysia and conducted a field work in Malaysia, completed the PhD at Glasgow, now a lecturer at Stirling University in England, in Scotland. So as you see here again, we build on theory of orders of worth, the particular social theory. Again, espoused by Boltanski and his associates to understand how disputes emerge in situations. That is our inquiry. How disputes emerge in situations and how such disputes themselves reach agreements in the context of community engagements by an NGO. That's our purpose, a social science research purpose. My PhD student did 9 months field work in Malaysia at an NGO-run river care program. We found in situations of disputes, coordinating acts, that's the thing, coordinating acts were predicated upon moral justifications. So coordinating acts and moral justifications by social actors, they make then program accountable to multiple stakeholders. So in this paper, in this project, we examined how accountability is constructed. We found that coordinating acts and moral justifications by social actors create accountability for multiple stakeholders. These coordinating acts develop dialogic accounts and transform felt accountability, feeling of accountability forms into a kind of adaptive form. As a result, we conclude NGO accountability in a developing country like Malaysia is a manifestation of people's ability of moral justifications governed by multiple orders of worth, variety of thinkings. Then adaptive accountability forms mediate to assimilate or embrace or grab global development agendas into local policies and programs. So in this research project, simply, we wanted to understand how situations of disputes are implicated in the construction of accountability within an NGO program, and also how these attempts are linked to global ideas of sustainability, development, etc. So what I wanted to demonstrate here is that social scientists use a social theory in order to frame a particular issue for understanding, as I said earlier, understanding what is going on, why and how things happen. Now, what is the implication of such research for impact? Firstly, you need to publish your work in a top-ranked journal. And also then, you need to make a case, or you need to make an attempt towards making an impact on economy, society, culture, policy, health, environment, etc. within your country and also overseas if possible. Therefore, just an academic publication is not enough. By conducting a research project, you may publish a paper top rank in a top ranked journal, but at the same time, you need to make an effort to translate your academic work to be read by, to be used by other people beyond the academia. UK universities are doing this now. To that extent, UK universities engage with a range of public, private, and charitable organizations, as well as local communities, in order to make wider impacts on society, on practice. Often, such impacts are very important, or such impacts are very effective when we do multidisciplinary research. For example, my accounting research is multidisciplinary because I use sociology, anthropology, political theory, history, in order to understand how and why things happen with respect to the use of accounting practices. In the UK, government assesses or evaluates the research impact. For that, government has a program. It is called REF, Research Excellence Framework. This government research assessment exercise asks us to develop impact case studies. They ask us to show, demonstrate how our academic research can make an impact on society and practice. And along with REF organization in the UK, there are some other independent organizations who analyze the nature of our impact. Organizations such as Digital Science, a division of Macmillan Science and Education, and they work in conjunction with Nature Publishing Group, and there is a Policy Institute at King's College London, and they do analysis of impact. And they are supported by, funded by the UK funding bodies, research councils, and Wellcome Trust. That means these organizations have come together in order to analyze how our research has made an impact on society and practice. So that is what is happening in the UK. If you are sending us a research proposal for a PhD to get a scholarship, for example, the Malaysian student I mentioned earlier received a Glasgow University scholarship to do the PhD with me. So when you prepare such a research proposal for a PhD, for example, you need to mention specifically how your research can make an impact, how your research can make an impact on economy, society, policy, and practice, etc. If you propose a multidisciplinary research project, potential for impact is very, very high. You can draw on various other disciplines, engineering, medicine, social sciences together. Or if you have done a PhD, and if you are an established academic now, you can team up with other scientists from other faculties, engineering, medicine, social sciences together to plan a multidisciplinary research project. Their impact will be very, very high. For example, agricultural sciences, engineering, and social sciences can think about how countries are moving to organic farming. You can do an academic research and translate your findings into policy analysis, into policy guides, into policy recommendations. The academic research direct impact is not policy recommendations. Instead, we make an academic conclusion in a paper. But having published a research paper, you can also translate your work, which can be read by, which can be understood by, which can be used by policymakers. Biology, medicine, social sciences, including management and accounting. These researchers can sit together and think about how we are debating, how we are envisaging a post-COVID world for an ecologically and biologically friendly set of practices, everyday practices, mundane practices. How we can imagine the future, reimagine the future, which can be ecologically and biologically friendly, which can be sustainable in terms of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So in order to think about such things, you can conduct interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research. Computer sciences, accounting can sit together, and you can explore how big data analytics extends the ways in which we account for and govern things in the world. So big data has now revolutionized accounting and governance practices. How that can be useful, how that can change the world, how that can create an ecologically and biologically friendly post-COVID world. These issues can be policy oriented, policy-directed questions as well. Hence, what I'm saying is that beyond pure academic research, you need to think of translating that into such policy guides. There are various ways of doing that. One way, you can make the publication first and think of a strategy to get policymakers, to get practitioners to refer to your work. Then they would follow wholly or partly your work in policymaking, in practicing. For example, a parliamentary member would refer to your paper in the parliament, stressing the point that that paper is an important one for us to have a guide to develop some policies. Or policymakers would refer to your work, published work, in a policy document, saying that that idea could be used to create a policy for us. That is one way of doing it. But it is very difficult because you need to strategize how to connect with policymakers, how to connect with practitioners in order to get them to refer to your work. It's difficult, but we in the UK are asked to do so. Therefore, we are making an effort to get the policymakers to refer to our work. Second, you can engage policymakers, practitioners in your research, which is called action research. You are doing a sort of advice, you are performing a sort of advisory role in an organization, for example, or for a government. You are finding something, and eventually you may produce two things. One, your academic publication. Second, you may write a report, a policy report with some recommendations. They are two different things. You should not be mixed up. Policy recommendations and the academic publications should not be mixed up. They are two different things. So through action research, you could engage policymakers in that way to produce two types, publications and recommendations. Or thirdly, you can draw on policy recommendations to produce publications and make the impact case retrospectively. That means you may involve in a practical project, advising, helping, inventing policymakers. That is what I have been doing in Sri Lanka, for example. I am engaging with the Sri Lankan World Bank office in Sri Lanka. They are implementing a particular project called social auditing, meaning they use local ordinary people, villagers, for example, in order to audit World Bank funded projects. So these ordinary people work as volunteers, as auditors, in order to judge how the World Bank funded projects are implemented, how the schools are constructed, how the roads are constructed, what are the procedures, what are the material they use, whether they use material correctly, whether everything is according to the budget, whether everything is transparent, etc. So that is social auditing. I've been involved in it by understanding what is going on and also by advising field officers as to how social audits can be done better. So I've been doing that in the past few years, but I haven't done an academic paper out of it. I have lots of data. I have lots of material. Now, retrospectively, I can now do an academic paper, write an academic paper out of it. So there are 3 ways of making an impact on society, on practice, on policy, if you have done a research. Remember 3 things. First, do an academic paper and translate into practitioners' work. Second, do an action research and produce the both simultaneously. Third, do the practical work first, then produce the academic work next. So in this way, you have to do 2 things together. One, doing an academic publication in top-ranked journals. Second, making an impact through a particular strategy on economy, policy, practice, etc. I'm sure you will start such an endeavor, start such a journey in order to produce such double commitments. Thank you very much for listening to me.